The deeper you get into watches, the more you start to appreciate some of the incredibly complex and diverse mechanical complications that are out there on the market. Yet, as many of you know, some of these complex or different complications can equal the price of a nice car or even a house. So in this video, what I wanted to do is highlight some different complications, things like alarms, Monopusher chronographs, triple calendars, to demonstrate that although they're not cheap, they are perhaps more in reach than you think. And before we jump into this video, if you want a crash course on the world of watch complications, we have a complete article looking at all the different complications, or many of them, and also might be good fresher up for knowledge. Do you know the difference between a triple calendar, annual calendar, and perpetual calendar? Things like that will be included in that article. We'll put it in the description down below. For our first watch here, we have a mechanical alarm, and a mechanical alarm is pretty much exactly what it sounds like. Offering audible mechanical type of alarm, typically set with a fourth hand, just like you'd find in an old school analog alarm clock. And for our alarm watch, we have one of the biggest historical players in that field with the Vulcain Cricket, which recently has undergone new ownership and is looking better than ever. Founded in 1858, Vulcain famously pioneered the first truly successful alarm wristwatch with the Cricket release in 1947. A watch that would, in tandem with its novel complication, would come to also be known as the US President's Watch, being gifted to Harry Truman by the White House News Photographers Association and worn by Eisenhower, LBJ, and Nixon to follow. After exchanging hands and ownership since the quartz crisis, the brand now belongs in the hands of perhaps the best brand reviver in the industry at the moment, Guillaume Ledet, a gentleman who is also responsible for the resurgence of other brands such as Excelsior Park and Nevada Gentian. Now, the flagship model Cricket, released in 2022, is available with either a 36mm or 39mm case, several dial formats, a range of colors, and your choice of strap. But the big move here is the proprietary movement. It is very important to stress that mechanical alarm calibers are non-existent in this price tier, essentially, especially since Tudor abandoned their advisor model. In this Vulcain, we have a proprietary caliber known as their V10, which is a manual winding mechanical alarm caliber with dual barrel system that was the leading reason for the success of the original, as one of the mainsprings is in charge of timekeeping and the other is dedicated to powering the alarm. Winding of the crown is done in both directions, one way for each mainspring, and once you set the alarm, the Cricket will make sure it is heard. Unlike traditional chronographs with its 2-button format, the Monopusher relies on a single pusher to start, stop, and reset, making it impossible to actuate the functions out of order, something that can potentially damage a traditional chronograph caliber, and in turn leads to a very elegant looking case with absence of the additional pusher. Now, I often jump to Ferrer when discussing one of my favorite micro and indie brands, thanks to their unique modernized takes on classic design elements with pleasing pops of color. And when it comes to Monopusher chronographs, Ferrer is offering some of the more attainable options out there with their Segrave Monopusher, which also happens to look very nice. Released in 2021, the Segrave Monopusher has a 40.5mm cushion case with intriguing textured sides and a more than necessary 100 meters of water resistance for a chronograph. The dial here is in deep blue with the brand's signature injections of color in the form of royal blue, green, and orange on the chronograph seconds. At the outskirts, we have one of my favorite chronograph scales in the form of a telemeter that can be used to measure the distance between an event that can both be seen and heard, such as artillery fire, if we're talking about from a historical perspective, or perhaps more practically nowadays, judging the distance of lightning. Relying upon a Salida caliber known as the SW510MP, this serves as a great option for those looking to not only get into a Monopusher system at a competitive price, but any mechanical chronograph for that matter with a Swiss-made stamp. Next, we have the jump hour. In comparison to a traditional hour hand that makes one revolution around the dial every 12 hours, a jumping hour is typically displayed using an aperture similar to how a date wheel might look set beneath the dial. But rather than gradually rotating, the jumping hour, well, jumps once per hour to display the new value. This next watch is from a brand that is known for creating jump hour designs with Reservoir, an independent brand launched in 2015 offering a visual display format inspired by gauges on vintage vintage automobiles and diving equipment. Featuring the very rare appearance of both a jump hour for the digital display at 6, retrograde minute hand, and a power reserve indicator, Reservoir is creating this functionality with a proprietary module used in collaboration with the ubiquitous ATA 2824. Although it's at $4,000, it's far from being cheap, but it's also offering quite a lot considering this is Swiss-made watch with aesthetics that are unlike pretty much anything else out there. Of course, unlike a chronograph or a GMT, none of these complications actually really do anything for you, but for fans of watchmaking and those that desire a watch that doubles as a fun party trick, this is an interesting brand to check out. Often when analyzing the world of chiming watches, it's typically reserved for the most select and expensive grand complications from brands. And in this instance, we will be looking at an hourly chiming watch that quite frankly somewhat changed the game upon its release last year, and that is the Bel Canto from Christopher Ward. So I've been dying to get my hands on this watch, and I'm excited to talk about it a little bit more. So Christopher Ward is one of the greatest success stories in British watchmaking in the past 25 years, having made an impressive name for themselves since the brand's launch back in 2004. Despite founding the brand with a number of what were almost homage-style designs, Christopher Ward is doing so much more these days, including completely out of left field type of approaches like this Bel Canto that offers the very seldom seen sonnerie au passage, a chiming complication that rings out once an hour at the top of every hour. It's not a minute repeater by any means, but it's also not $100,000. The caliber is a modular execution working off of a SW200 base with an additional FS01 module developed by Christopher Ward and based on a module that they use in their Malvern Jump Hour watch back in 2017. Now the small pusher at 4 acts as an on-off switch, as you probably don't want this thing going off all in the middle of the night. And then looking beyond its complication capabilities, the watch also looks incredibly well finished for both its price point and for Christopher Ward as a brand, with the hammer and other visible caliber elements looking nice in the process, almost floating over the Azzurro blue sunray style texture beneath. For our next complication, we will be looking at the regulator. So a regulator separates the hour, minute, and seconds hands onto their own sub-registers or own display formats, with the minute hand being the largest, typically mounted at the center, with the secondary registers for the hour and seconds. While one brand that also needs to be mentioned here is Louis Erard. For many of their regulator pieces, they're really owners of this complication type in the price range, but they are a little bit more expensive than the watch we're going to be looking at here, and this is from Alpina, and this has more of a sporty approach to the complication that is conventionally a little bit more dressy. Specifically, we're looking at Alpina's Alpiner Extreme Regulator Automatic, and this takes a rugged approach to the age-old complication with a 41mm case, 200 meters of water resistance, and capable luminescent material, and an eye-catching dial texture. Alpina is known for their Explorers watches and having some of the best finished cases for their price segment, and is able to make this regulator more aggressively priced by way of the reliable Sellita base caliber, which is in view beneath the Sapphire Exhibition caseback on the inside. Not a complication that is in high demand, but one that is exceptionally entrancing visually is seconds on a disc, which opts for, well, putting seconds on a rotating disc, then utilizing a fixed sub-register with a hand to indicate precise time. Now, founded as recently as 2018 in Paris, France, Trelobe is an entire company based on a unique display format with their inventive rotating disc to display the time. Along with the display, Trelobe also utilizes a proprietary 4 Hz movement known as their X-centric. A big reason why I like to champion this brand along with something like the Bel Canto now is it brings an unordinary complication and style for its price, as under $10,000 you can get into their Nuit Fantastique. The piece comes with a well-finished titanium case and is available in either 38.5mm or 40.5mm case sizes. This is a watch that really needs to be appreciated also in person or in video, as the outer perimeter showcases the hours, then the small aperture gradually rotates to show the minutes, and then just beneath you have your seconds on a disc that spins to match the needed 60-second duration for one full rotation. And for our final complication, we have the triple calendar with a chronograph. So a triple calendar is a watch that showcases the day-date function with a month indicator, but unlike that of a perpetual calendar or annual calendar, it will require manual interventions at different parts of the year for select months, while of course not factoring in leap years at all. Pairing this complication with a chronograph will usually have you paying a price of a house if you look at brands like Patek Philippe. But here we have one of the best deals on the market with the calendar chronograph from the Master Collection from Longines. For me, this watch watch is one of the more underrated options in Longines collection, and that is saying something considering I think much of their historical importance despite their size is lost on collectors. This watch for less than $4,000 offers not only a Swiss-made calendar chronograph, but a movement that is assembled at their HQ, features a column wheel, and one of the most attainable calendar watches on the market in general. But even with all of that, the watch is still relatively slim and wearable given its complications, coming in at just over 14 millimeters in height, which for reference is around the same thickness of a Tudor Black Bay chronograph, and that watch is not including any calendar to speak of. The rest of the dimensions are also solid, with a 41 millimeter diameter that wears smaller on wrist and a 46.3 millimeter lug to lug. The dial leans into the classical traits associated with the complication type, with a guilloche style texture on the dial's primary surface and blued hands. But all right guys, that is my video looking at some complications in the watch market that perhaps are not as expensive as you originally thought. If you guys like this video, please give it a thumbs up, subscribe, hit the bell icon. Of all of these watches, which one do you think provides the most unique or maybe the best value of this entire list? I think these are showing some outliers in the world, and it goes to show that you don't have to spend the cost of a nice car or a house to get into some of these complications. Now, these are not cheap watches, but they are much more attainable than I think maybe some people might initially realize. Also, definitely check out teddybaldassarre.com, full authorized dealer of 30 brands, quick and fast fulfillment, dedicated customer support, and a full factory warranty for all the products that we offer. But guys, thank you again so much for watching. Be well, and I will see you all very soon.